Florida has a problem. Yeah, I know. They have lots of problems, but they have a problem that's coming bigger and badder than it's ever been, and that's the problem of sargassum. We've talked about sargassum before. It's an algae, a type of seaweed, really, that has been washing up on the shores of Florida earlier than ever before, and it's coming in bigger and badder. We know Florida has a lot of water quality problems, but sargassum provides a number of challenges for Florida and other coastal states in the United States of America, as well as Caribbean countries. So we're going to talk about sort of the troubles that it's causing Florida and sort of the challenges that they face, but also the opportunities that could be provided in the disposal, and again, some of the challenges. So we're going to talk about all of that on this episode of How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening in the ocean, what you can do to speak up for the ocean, and how you can live for a better ocean by taking action. And before we get into sargassum and everything you need to know about sargassum that we've covered before and more, I wanted to just let you know this episode is sponsored by the program that I run called How to Build Your Marine Science and Conservation Career. It's an audio program that runs weekly. It's a private podcast where you can sign up for $5 a month and you can get information, strategies, tips. I go through to how to build a career, how to not only get a job, how to apply for jobs, but also just planning your career. And then I go through sort of how I would apply for different jobs and how I'd look for different jobs based on sort of the goals of that job and sort of how like someone in that career path would go ahead and apply for that. It's something that's never really been done before. It's something that I've been building. I want to kind of keep the cost low to provide you with the opportunity to get you to where you need to go. So that's the podcast. That is what's being advertised on this episode. So if you want to sign up for it, go to speakupforblue.com. That's speakupforblue.com/career. Speakupforblue.com/career. Let's get into the episode. Sargassum is a huge problem. It's something that I've talked about a couple of times before in the past. Something that I've actively seen in real life. The problem that sargassum poses on a beach in a resort area in the Caribbean. I've seen it in Mexico. I've seen it in the Dominican Republic. It's been something that we've had to go through. It's something that's affected my family's sort of vacation, as well as other people's vacations. When you see sargassum on a beach and when it's really like, sometimes you see it and it's just a little bit of sargassum here and there. It's like comes in patches. People are like, "Ew, this is gross. It's algae. It's seaweed. It's pickly. It's prickly a little bit. I don't like it touching my skin. Nobody wants to have something in the ocean that touches it. People get afraid of it. I look at it as a kind of an opportunity to look within sort of the area, like the sargassum itself. You see some bubble algae. You see some little critters that kind of hide in there. So I think it's an opportunity. But a lot of other people do not like it. And it also piles up over and over and over again if it gets bad. And just from firsthand account, I've seen, walking along the beach, I've seen patches of where, sargassum is piled up on the beach, like up to your knees. And then you just see black in the ocean because it's so dark from all the density of sargassum that's washing up along the beach. So it can definitely impact somebody's vacation or somebody's beach, which can have, we talked about on the last episode where I talked about sargassum, where it was a problem because, people don't want to go into that area for vacation. If you're going to see it on Travel Advisor, reviews and stuff like that at certain times of the year, you'd be like, I don't want to travel that place at that time because of sargassum. So it's going to affect tourism. It's going to affect ecotourism at different times of the year. And it's a big problem. It's also a problem from a health perspective because if you don't get rid of the sargassum that piles up on the beach, it affects people's breathing, people who have asthma. It gives off a really bad odor when it decomposes. And so a lot of places in the Caribbean will just kind of grab it, just collect it, in dump trucks and so forth, which is there all day, and then they'll dispose of it in a jungle, which is not good. When you think of the long-term effects of it disposing in a jungle or disposing in some wildlife area, it can pose a lot of problems. It's not used to, those jungles and those areas are not used to seeing sargassum. And when you start to look at sort of the effects of decomposing anything, especially in the tons and tons and tons that it comes in terms of the amount, you're looking at a big health problem and probably a big ecosystem problem in the long term. So what do we do? Florida, has also challenges because there are specific regulations around collection and disposal and handling of sargassum. In an NPR article that I based this episode off of, they're looking at how it's being removed and sort of what are the regulations around it. It can be very, very difficult to go through. According to let's see of the person's name here, Allison Crin. She's a public information officer for Key West in Florida. She says strict environmental laws say that the sargassum can't be taken out of the water, and installing contaminant barriers in the water would be a battle, she says, because it takes a long time to get any permits approved by the state. It says closer ashore, sargassum can also pose a threat to local wildlife, smothering coral reefs and seagrasses. But in the open ocean, it can store carbon, and the key driver of climate change, and it could also serve as a prime habitat for sea turtles and fish and crustaceans. But when it comes in on the shore, when you talk about sea turtles, when you have these little hatchlings that go out, they can get caught up in the seagrass because it's so dense they may not be able to swim through it. So there are certain outfits that go around and check within the sargassum as they rake it off the beach to see if any sea turtle hatchlings got caught in it, because it could definitely pose a problem. I mean, sea turtle hatchlings have enough challenges getting to the ocean and then surviving within the ocean at their size until they become adults. And even when they do become adults, they have challenges. So, the life of a sea turtle is not easy. It's cute and it's adorable, but it's not easy. And having sargassum come on the beach so close to shore in the density that it comes in will pose another challenge for the sea turtles to overcome, which we don't want. Now, the cost of the removal, or just to handle it, it's routine cost to the city, about $1 million in Key West. But it's also prepared to go for more in their reserve stash if necessary. Areas like Miami-Dade County, which looks after Miami as well as other surrounding areas, they spent more than $3.9 million on sargassum cleanup last year, and is looking for the state to provide an additional $2 million. Now, couple this with all the problems that Miami, or that the sort of the Florida waters, coastal waters, is having with algae and red tide. Seems like every year now you have this sargassum. It seems like Florida's getting a pounding from the ocean in terms of pollution, and it's being caused by a lot of different things. Sargassum probably not caused directly from Florida. You're looking at the causes are probably climate change and the heat, but also the driving factor, according to some research papers, is the increase of nitrogen availability in some areas of the ocean, including the output of the Amazon River and maybe Mississippi rivers, just based on the agriculture that's used there and fertilizers that are used there that allow sargassum to grow so much and so quickly. So here, when we talk, this episode is more about what happens with the disposal and what are the challenges of the disposal and what are the opportunities of the disposal. So going back to sort of the permitting and everything, it's very difficult to do anything with in Florida with the sargassum. You can't remove it from the water, apparently. If you ignore it, it smells like rotten eggs, essentially, after about 24 hours after hitting the shore. And so, it can cause problems. It can cause health problems. So being able to do something about it is a big thing. So to be able to say, it's easy to dispose of, it's not. It's a very difficult thing to do. So Key West waits for seaweed to wash ashore. On summer mornings, a team of volunteers walk the beaches to check for trapped sea turtle hatchlings. After the all clear, a contracted company uses heavy equipment to take the seagrass or the sargassum off of the beach with special permitting. So the costs are a lot, and so they have to dispose of it. So disposing of it is a huge problem. Key West contracts people to donate sargassum to farmers to use as fertilizer. In Mexico, like I said, they're trucked to the jungles to rot. But options for processing and decomposing seaweed may become costlier as the field of sargassum study grows. So researcher Brian Lapointe told NPR last month that new research suggests decomposing sargassum may leach heavy metals. One study showed that it was very high in arsenic. So it said found that 80% of the samples had arsenic levels that were higher than the UN's limit for livestock feed. So repurposing may not be the best option for it, especially when you're repurposing it to use as fertilizer when there's extra arsenic in the fertilizer for the cows when they eat the pasture. So that's not obviously that's not a optimal kind of way of doing things. So can we do anything at all? The article asks. Some companies are trying to be creative, experimenting with turning sargassum into biofuel, construction materials, or even medicinal products. And one promising idea is the two birds with one stone approach, which is the blue carbon approach. It's basically sinking sargassum to prevent it from releasing carbon, which would also help fight climate change. We've talked about blue carbon before. We talked about the effects of sinking algae, sinking seagrasses, sinking kelp, even sinking sargassum to the depths of the ocean. We don't know the repercussions of it. However, this seems to be a very prominent and heavily researched area to go about doing when we're looking at carbon credits and sinking carbon and having companies to pay, or countries and companies to pay to offset their carbons. So there's one company, a UK startup called Seaweed Generation, is building an autonomous robot that could intercept sargassum patches close to shore, drag them back out of the ocean or out of the open ocean, and force them to sink to a depth of 1,000 meters, effectively trapping the carbon in the ocean. They say it's a little bit like a seaweed Roomba, the vacuum Roomba, which is a company CEO, Patty Estridge, told NPR. It goes through the water very, very slowly and a bit like a Pac-Man scoops up the seaweed. Then it drives down and offloads the biomass to about 200 meters deep, where the air pods of the sargassum. So sargassum is known for having these little air bubbles in its structure to help it float. It says it'll pop those air pods and sending the mass to its watery grave. The so-called algae ray is still in pilot phases, funded by venture capitalists, but if successful, a fully fledged model could be ready to operate next year, submerging as much as 15 tons of sargassum in a single trip. Here's the problem with that. We have no idea the effects on the environment. Let's be honest, we've talked about sort of the ocean cleanup and what of a bit of a scam that is in terms of the effects on and the reporting on environmental factors, and the fact that whether they can actually clean up the ocean of plastic pollution. This sounds a lot like it. Not to say that this company is bad in any kind of way or it's not trying to help the ocean, but what I worry about when you have a pod that's trying to, chomp the bits of sargassum and basically take anything else with it, including organisms, floating organisms, and then dropping it down, to 200 meters and just doing that circulation. Can that harm animals? Is that ethical? Is that the way to go about? Are we past that point of looking at this because of sinking carbon? And then what are we looking at? 15 tons of carbon per trip? What defines as a trip in terms of length of time? And then what are the long-term, short-term and long-term effects of continuing to sink sargassum in certain places around the world? This concerns me a little bit, but it is one option of getting rid of sargassum. I would mind seeing sargassum being used for other products on land. Can it be used in clothing like kelp is being used in clothing? Can it be used to build other items? Like they talked about construction materials and biofuel and things like that. Can sargassum be used as different places or in different sort of methods in different applications? That's something that I want to explore a little bit more. This is a huge, huge thing that we have to be careful of. And when I go back to the thing of going away, the first thing I ask people when they say they're going away, I said, have you checked where sargassum is at the time you're going away? And a lot of people are like, what is sargassum and why am I worried about it? And I tell them, and there are sites where you can look and you can, I'll link to it in the show notes, but I'm looking in the article on the NPR article, or link on the NPR article, and there's like a NOAA, basically it's called an Experimental Weekly Sargassum Inundation Risk, and it basically shows you where sargassum is going to be at a specific time in the Gulf of Mexico. Right, so it's basically, it tells you, it almost looks a little bit in the northern Caribbean. Shows you, the Cancun area in Mexico, but it also shows you along Florida where it's high, where it's medium, where it's low, and where there's no data. But it looks pretty interesting when you look at it overall and where sargassum is hitting at the time that you want to go away. Maybe they'll have predictive models in the future, but they'll look at like a percentage of shoreline that is being hit by certain areas. It's something that I think you should be looking at. They even have like the Great Antilles, so they'll show Jamaica, Punta Cana, San Juan. These are all areas that will be affected by the risk of having sargassum on it. And it's something that I think people should be looking at. So I'll put a link to in the show notes. If you're looking at a trip in the Caribbean, you may want to take a look at this map before you go. The time is basically from April 25th to May 1st that I'm looking at. So it changes over that time. And hopefully you can do other reports. You can look at the past. And so hopefully you can look at, it goes all the way back to like 2019 on this website. So I'll put that link in the show notes for you. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on sargassum and coming in along the shorelines, what to do about it. If you have ideas, obviously I won't share the ideas with everybody else unless I have permission, but I'd love to hear what you think it could be done with sargassum. If you have any insights or any comments on this episode, please feel free to contact me, DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. And if you are interested, if this story inspires you to do something about the ocean and work in a life in the field of ocean conservation, feel free to go to the Build You and sign up for the Build Your Career in Marine Science and Conservation at speakupforblue.com/career. That's speakupforblue.com/career. The link will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Hope you have a great day. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. We'll talk to you soon, and happy conservation.